started discovering that, hey, wait a minute, every time we get a new set of pilots, like these Cessna pilots would move on to the large turboprops. So now we'd have new Cessna pilots. And of course, now we'd have new pilots on the turboprops. And the reason there was space for new pilots on the turboprops was because somebody went up onto the Boeings, right? So there, for the first couple of years, there was always new pilots going on to a new type of aircraft. So in the beginning, we didn't really see what was going on, but after we clued into, hey, wait a minute, every time we get a new set of pilots, we start experiencing these problems again. Knowing what the issue is helps kind of react to it, because if you don't know what it is, obviously, how can you react to it? So.
Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. Welcome to our YouTube channel and to another episode of Storytime with Bret. In this series, we talk about situations and experiences that Bret came across in his 40 plus years in aviation as an aircraft maintenance engineer, aviation manager, and civil aviation authority inspector. So today we would like to propose a scenario situation that I'm sure a lot of aviation professionals are going to relate to, which is about the challenges that can arise when an operator or airline grows fast, very fast in a short period of time, and the effects that this has on airworthiness, flight operations, and maintenance. So, Bret, welcome back. And I'd like to start by painting a scenario of the environment you were working in, type of aircraft, operations.
Thanks, Annalisa. So this experience was many years ago, and I was working for an operator. It was a large maintenance facility. It was an AOC holder, and they operated small twin-engine Cessna aircraft as a cargo courier. They operated large turboprops as a cargo courier, and they operated large jet aircraft, Boeing aircraft, that were both cargo couriers and scheduled passenger service. And the company grew very, very fast. When I started, there were not a lot of people, and inside of a year, we took on about probably 20 more aircraft. And with that, of course, there are people that are required: pilots, engineers, maintenance control staff, record staff, continuing airworthiness people. So all that to say, in a very short period, we took on a lot of different people in different scenarios, different roles.
All right, very interesting. So what were the issues that you had in this type of environment?
So from my perspective, working out at one of the outstations, every night we would see different aircraft. We would see the Cessna aircraft, we would see the Convairs and the Boeing. So we got a good perspective of all of it. And with that, of course, we'd see the flight crews. We'd work on the aircraft, and we'd interact with maintenance control and the airworthiness side of it. And what we saw with the influx of pilots, with the Cessna aircraft, anybody that was with the company earlier moved on to the bigger aircraft. So it always seemed that the Cessna aircraft, they were always getting new pilots. Like when I say new, I'm talking about some of them, when they approached the company, they didn't even have the appropriate amount of experience on their license yet. And so they would talk to the company and work towards getting that, just so they could fly the Cessnas. So meanwhile, you've got these pilots that have been piloting the Cessnas with not a lot of experience over the years, relative, and moving on to the large turboprop aircraft. So pilots that were flying the Cessna aircraft move up to the large turboprop aircraft, and then a lot of the large turboprop aircraft pilots moving up to the Boeing aircraft. So this doesn't seem like an issue, and it was a good thing for the pilots. Everybody had some advancement in their careers. But for us, it created issues that we saw all the time. The issues, basically, it was the pilots getting to know the aircraft that they were moving on to, because they were all new to the types that they were, I wouldn't say all, but the majority of the pilots moving up, obviously, onto a new type. That type was new to them, and with that, there were all kinds of issues that we discovered. So some of the issues that we noticed right off is when you have new pilots, for instance, say on the Cessna aircraft, we started experiencing things like increased incidence of having to change cylinders on the aircraft. And when we first started getting new pilots on the aircraft, there would be a high incidence of changing cylinders, like maybe one or two every 2 or 3 months, at where it used to be one a year, maybe two. But and then after those pilots were on the aircraft for a while, and we talked to them about how to manage the aircraft a little better, instead of just chopping the power on descent at altitude, to gradually reduce power and not thermal shock the engine, right? So things like that. And so once these pilots got to know the aircraft, we started having less problems in that respect. But it wasn't just that scenario. There were many different scenarios. They would come in with radio problems where it really wasn't radio problems, it was finger trouble. And that was an interesting situation. And then of course with the large turboprop aircraft, we would see the same thing. A lot of the pilots wouldn't be familiar with the aircraft and how to manage it. I mean, of course, they'd all been trained and everything, but it's like a new car. You can be shown how everything works on a new car, but it's not until you get out there and you're driving down the road and you go to use something and you can't remember exactly how it worked and where the button was for that, right? I mean, it's a little different scenario, but I think you get the idea, right?
Right. So, yeah. I mean, every machine has their own quirkiness and things that you just have to learn.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a couple of different vehicles, and you get in one, and the wiper switch is in a different place than the other one, right? So, same concept. So, and then of course with the large Boeing aircraft, same issues. You've got new people on the aircraft, experiencing things that they think might be problems, but they don't know. And of course, they're always taught, and we always tell them, if you're not sure, write it down, bring it up, let's talk about it. So in the beginning, when you have a new set of pilots on a type or a set of pilots that are on a type that's new to them, you do a lot of talking. And that's what we did. It was a big learning experience for us on the maintenance and airworthiness side. And it was also a big learning curve for the pilots as well, obviously, right? So.
Right. So basically, there were a lot of turnaround of pilots coming into the company because the company was expanding, and they were moving from one type to another type to another type. And because they were new and they were getting the experience, they were coming up with a lot of issues. I understand. So you mentioned briefly, for example, that on one type of aircraft there was a problem with the cylinder. So you guys talked to the pilot about not cutting the power. So obviously, over time, you guys came up with some solutions to these issues. How that worked out?
Yeah, well, this was over the course of a couple of years, right? And so in the very beginning, when these things started happening, like the increased incidence of cylinder replacements or discrepancies on the other aircraft, where when we had fewer aircraft, it seemed we didn't have the same problems, right? So in the beginning, when the operation first expanded, we were a little, I don't want to say ignorant to what was going on, but we were a little blind as to what was going on. And what that was the unfamiliarity of the aircraft type to the pilots. But once we started going down the avenue of troubleshooting these problems, which of course you had to because you didn't know if they were legitimate problems or not, then we started discovering that, hey, wait a minute, every time we get a new set of pilots, like these Cessna pilots would move on to the large turboprops. So now we'd have new Cessna pilots. And of course, now we'd have new pilots on the turboprops. And the reason there was space for new pilots on the turboprops was because somebody went up onto the Boeings, right? So for the first couple of years, there was always new pilots going on to a new type of aircraft. So in the beginning, we didn't really see what was going on. But after we clued into, hey, wait a minute, every time we get a new set of pilots, we start experiencing these problems again. That, knowing what the issue is helps kind of react to it, because if you don't know what it is, obviously, how can you react to it? So yes, after that, we started talking to the pilots when we get new pilots on, and we'd start discussing, if well, things like the thermoshock issue with the cylinders, right? And so that tended to work. And also with all of the discrepancies that were being reported and all of the troubleshooting that was happening, when a pilot started coming to us on any of the aircraft with an issue, right away we could almost tell what the issue was and that whether it was an issue or not. I mean, you still had to chase it down, but half of it was educating the pilots. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but rather, if I'm maintaining an aircraft all the time, and so, all of a sudden I get a different set of pilots on it, and they come and they tell me that there's a problem with it, that the last set of pilots told me that there was a problem with, and I troubleshot it and found that it's really not a problem. It's an idiosyncrasy with that aircraft. Then you can relay that to the next crew and the next and the next, as it were.
Right. So obviously this was a long time ago, where SMS wasn't really a thing at that time, but I'm sure quality management, compliance monitoring, however you want to call it, was in place. So, and other dynamics were in place. So for example, we are talking about an airline in this case. So you have pilots, you have maintenance, and you have somebody who is managing the airworthiness, the tasks, analyzing the defects. So was this talking between maintenance and the pilots just a talking, or there was some reporting, these issues actually went to the airworthiness management department and quality department?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. I mean, obviously, we used to meet the crews all the time when they came back, regardless what aircraft it was, and we'd have a debrief with them as to any issues with the aircraft. Of course, they would record anything that they thought was an issue or discrepancy in the logbooks. So, that we had the one-on-one interaction with the pilots, but also through the logbooks and pilot reports. Of course, we were required to have a reliability program. So we had a couple of things going on in the background where maintenance control, we had a maintenance control center. So they monitor the ongoing issues with the aircraft, and they could start to sense trends as well. And then we also, like I mentioned, we had the reliability review board. So we would collect data. Management would convene in the reliability review committee, and they would go over the issues. So they would be able to determine from that if there were any real issues, or if these were recurring themes that we've already dealt with and we need to just disseminate them better in some instances. So those were the days before, like you said, SMFs and the concept of having a change management program and things like this, right? So in today's world, ideally, I mean, I've seen it firsthand where a commercial air operator takes on new aircraft types, and they fail to go through the change management plan, or they fail to put one together. So it can still be that you overlook things like that. It shouldn't be anymore, because it's been recognized through SMS that these are issues, and that's the whole concept of it, is to prevent any issue from arising that's known, right? Any known issues. So
okay, so we have been working in different environments, from commercial to private, from small aircraft to larger aircraft. So what kind of advice would you give to people who are experiencing this? They work for an operator who is expanding, the fleet is growing very fast. And I would like to tie this with another question, which is, what is the role of the authority, if the authority has a role at all? Because, in a more regimented type of environment like an airline, if you go through an expansion, like you said, you're going to have some plans in place, change management, expansion of fleet. You're going to have a number of risk assessments, but it's not always like that. With smaller operator, you might not have a big system in place. So what are your advice, and what do you think the role of the authority should be?
Well, with my advice for small operators, by that I mean not necessarily small aircraft, but small operations where they only operate, one or two or a handful of aircraft, to reach out and speak with other people, because I found more often than not, if you talk to other operators that have been doing the same thing that you want to do for a number of years, whether it be operate a certain type of aircraft or into a certain airport or anything at all, people are willing to share information, and that's the key, is to understand what you don't know, right? So, and if you approach other operators, there's a saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? But if you approach another operator and discuss, for instance, that you want to start going into a certain airport, and they've been doing it for a few years, they will probably be able to share some valuable information on the ins and outs, how who to approach for permissions to go into a certain airport, or any geographical problems with it, or even weather problems. You go into an airport like Whitecourt in northern Alberta, they have fog all the time, and that's an issue, right? So it's something that when you first get an airplane, one or two or three, and you decide you want to start doing something with it, if you haven't done it, you don't know, right? So that would be my recommendation for the small operators. For the larger operators, obviously, change management is a big thing. Embrace the SMS and employ your change management for almost anything. I mean, the influx of pilots in an operation, all of a sudden, if you're hiring 20, 30, 40 pilots, that's a big change. If you're going from 2 Boeing aircraft to 20, that's a big change. And the changes that are big, a lot of people don't even think about the interrelationship. I mean, yeah, you're going to need 20 or 30 pilots, but what about ground crew? What about ground handling? What about cabin crews? There's so many different aspects, and they're all interrelated. The reliability program, there's so many different aspects, and if you don't go through that exercise, you're going to trip over yourself somewhere or another. And then the final part to your question there is the authority's role. Well, as a regulator, if I have an air operator that wants to start flying a new aircraft type that they haven't flown before, or they haven't managed before, perhaps they need to employ, in an EASA environment or an overseas territories environment, maybe they need to employ a camo that has experience in managing those type of aircraft where they don't have that ability in-house. They may manage aircraft in-house, but not that type. And I've seen that. The other thing is the putting an emphasis and holding people accountable to using their change management program. Because again, I've seen air operators bring new aircraft into the fleet where they haven't gone through that exercise, and they are starting to experience problems, and they would have avoided those problems had they gone through the exercise. So as a regulator, it's important to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do, and if they don't, you got to call them on it. Then not so much in a way of punishing them, but rather, a lot of them don't understand the value and why they should be doing it. And if you explain that to them and show them in real terms, usually they get on board with it pretty quick.
Yeah, no, I like that because, like you said, there are a lot of operators out there who already went through this kind of process. So you don't need to improvise or, spend, waste time and money and energy tripping all over yourself while the path has already been highlighted by other operators before you. So if you do all of those things, it's not only a matter of being compliant with the regulation, but also it's just for yourself. It's good for yourself so that you know what you're going to face in the near future. So yeah, I like that, and I also like the fact that even for small operators, we have dealt with helicopters from operating from a yacht. If you do anything new, a new pilot, a new machine, a new area of operations, it's always good to just sit down and evaluate, do an assessment of all the new things that may come your way. And if you experience something, it's good to actually write it down. So the new pilot, put it in the operations manual, put it in a small company manual, so that whoever is new come in can have a reference and you know how to face all of these possible issues down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And what you just said about them recording it so future people will be able to see what's there. There's definitely that aspect to it, but there's also, from a regulatory perspective, you want to capture these activities in some sort of record, because that's your evidence that you actually did some sort of change management assessment or risk assessment or whatever the case might be. Because if something ever goes wrong and you say, well, we did that, where's the evidence? How do you prove that you did that? How do you prove what you looked at and what you took into account? If it's not documented, it's hard to support.
Yeah, exactly. And I like what you were saying about airlines, bigger operators, where they have a more solid structure, where they have the reliability program, a department, so where they can analyze all the defects, all the issues, and those issues can be managed by different departments. So if there is from maintenance is coming up that there is an issue, there is not really an issue, that can be transformed in like a small training program for the pilot. So now this knowledge that comes from the maintenance can go to the flight operations, and so that is not anymore a problem for any department, right? And it's going to save money, time, operations goes smoother. It's a win-win for everybody, right?
Right. Yeah, simple standard operating procedures, right? It's they're not the same with every operator, and maybe some operators operate in different environments that require different standards to be employed. There's all kinds of reasons. So absolutely.
So now one more point that I would like to make. So we often talk about reporting defects, and we talk a lot about that in our book, Introduction to Aircraft Management, and in other videos and episode of podcasts that we've been doing. So we always mention it's important to report defect. And this is my take. It's fundamental, whether it's a problem or not. What's your take on it?
Absolutely. Reporting defects is always important. If there is an issue with the aircraft and you don't report it, one, the aircraft can't be repaired, because how can it be repaired if nobody knows that it's broken? Two, the aircraft can be dispatched again. And in a scenario like I was talking about, you're getting, and this is very common with air operations, commercial air operations, different flight crews all the time, right? So now you're passing a broken airplane onto another pilot that unknowingly accepting this aircraft in that state, which raises a number of issues. But most importantly, that defect by itself may not be an issue, but if you compound that with other defects that might arise, it could be an issue. So you're potentially allowing an unsafe condition to come into play, right? So there's that aspect. Reliability, particularly in a commercial air operation, is a requirement to have a reliability review program. And if defects aren't being recorded, then you don't allow the system to do what it's supposed to be doing. You're typically allowed a circuit breaker reset. That doesn't mean just because you reset it and it worked fine that you didn't have discrepancy. That should still be reported, because it could be that, okay, you saw it pop once, Now you change crew and he saw it pop once, and now you change crew the next day and they saw it pop. But that's 3 times in 3 flights or 3 days. That's a recurring defect. That needs to be investigated. But if it's not recorded, then it goes unnoted. Nobody's aware of it, and it could be a latent issue.
Yeah, right. And even, reporting a defect that at the end is not a defect, it's still an important process to go through, because it helps the pilot to understand how to report defects. And it also helps with the training, because now that information can again be passed on to the next crew, and they can say, oh, okay, this is how this works. So I'm aware of that. I can make the right decision during the flight.
Yeah, for sure. For the next crew, for all of the crews, but even for the person that's reporting it, inevitably what I find is if somebody reports a defect, they're curious to see what the fix was, because if they know what the fix was and to something that they reported, if it wasn't an issue, then that is an education to them, and if it was an issue, that's an education as well, potentially, as to and it can be, well, definitely for future use, right? So if they see that happening again and they understand, okay, that's not really an issue because, and it's explained to them, then they don't write it up again because they understand that. Or if they do see that issue and it was a problem and they understand the implications of it, then potentially they're going to not accept an aircraft with an unsafe condition.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the story. We could go on and on and on different directions, because there are so many aspects to it. So thank you so much for watching and for spending your time with us today. And we hope that this story resonated with you and with your experience. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. And if you like this kind of content, please consider to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's going to help us reaching more people, more aviation professionals who might resonate with this kind of content, might enjoy this content. I'd like also to remind you about the other episode of Storytime with Bret. They are all available on our YouTube channel and our podcast, Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C, where we speak with the different aviation professionals and civil aviation authorities about different topics. So for more information about us, tips, articles, you can go to our website, cacglobalsolutions.com, and subscribe to our monthly newsletter, and follow us on LinkedIn, Meta, and YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you very soon. Bye for now.
Bye.